Everyone thinks modern aircraft are fail-safe. On June 1, 2009, a Boeing 777 proved them catastrophically wrong. At 10:14 p.m., on May 31, 2009, Air France Flight 447 pushed back from Rio de Janeiro's Galo International Airport. The aircraft, a state-of-the-art Boeing 777-200ER, carried 228 passengers and crew bound for Paris. The night was warm, the runway clear. Nobody aboard knew this was their last departure. The flight proceeded normally through the early morning hours. Captain Marc Dubois, a 58-year-old veteran with over 11,000 flight hours, commanded the cockpit with two first officers. The aircraft climbed to cruise altitude 35,000 feet as darkness swallowed the Atlantic. No distress calls would ever be made. Around 2:10 a.m. on June 1st, the aircraft entered a region of severe convective activity, towering thunderstorms that meteorologists had flagged. The pilots were aware of the weather. They'd chosen their altitude and route deliberately, but what they didn't know yet would matter more than what they did. This telegram right here, this is the last automated transmission the aircraft sent. It arrived at 2:13 a.m., everything nominal, fuel consumption tracking, systems green. 4 minutes later, the next scheduled update never came. The aircraft had vanished from radar screens across 2 continents. Air traffic control didn't immediately grasp the gravity. At first, it was a communication glitch, a temporary radar loss. But as minutes stretched to hours with no radio contact, the reality crystallized. A modern jetliner carrying 228 souls had simply ceased to exist. The search began immediately. Within hours, debris fields were spotted in the Atlantic roughly 400 miles northeast of their last known position. But the bodies and the black boxes lay 3,900 meters below the surface. It would take 5 years to recover them, 5 years of uncertainty. When the flight data recorder finally surfaced in 2011, investigators discovered something shocking. The aircraft hadn't suffered a mechanical failure, no engine fire, no structural failure. Instead, the disaster unfolded in a sequence of human decisions and technical cascades that nobody had fully anticipated. Here's where the complexity deepens. The aircraft's speed sensors, 3 independent pitot tubes, began icing over in the severe convective weather. These instruments measure airspeed, the most fundamental data the autopilot and flight control computers require. When they failed, the systems didn't know how fast they were flying. At 2:10 a.m., the first pitot tube disconnected. Seconds later, a second failed. The autopilot, suddenly flying blind, disengaged. The flight control laws downgraded from the normal automated mode to an alternate mode. The aircraft didn't crash, it simply handed control to the pilots without warning them the situation had fundamentally changed. Captain Dubois had stepped out of the cockpit moments before a routine rest break. One of the first officers, 32-year-old Pierre-Cédric Bonin, was flying. The other, 24-year-old David Robert, was monitoring. Bonin received an uncommanded bank alert. The aircraft was tilting. He pulled back on his stick hard. This is the irony that still haunts aviation experts. Bonin's instinct to pull back on the control stick was exactly wrong for the situation. Without reliable airspeed data, the aircraft was already approaching a stall. Pulling back increased the angle of attack, pushing the nose higher. He was making it worse. David Robert noticed the altitude dropping and the vertical speed increasing. He called out the descent, but neither pilot seemed to grasp what was happening. The aircraft was in a stall, a complete aerodynamic failure where the wings lose lift. No amount of engine thrust could recover from it at that point. Captain Dubois returned to the cockpit after hearing the automated stall warning, but by then, the aircraft had already descended several thousand feet. The recovery window, if one had ever existed, had closed. The 777 was in an uncontrolled fall toward the Atlantic below. At 2:14 a.m., just 4 minutes after the first pitot tube failure, the aircraft impacted the Atlantic at high speed. 228 people perished. The investigation concluded it wasn't a design flaw or mechanical failure. It was a sequence of sensor icing, automation disengagement, and human response under extreme stress and incomplete information. Airbus redesigned the pitot tube system. Airlines retrained pilots on high-altitude stall recovery. The aviation industry absorbed the lessons. But this exhibit right here, these documents, these timelines, they remind us that even in our most advanced machines, the gap between safety and catastrophe can collapse in minutes. The families never got closure in the traditional sense. No survivors to tell the story. No dramatic rescue. Just a methodical investigation that peeled back layers of mechanical failure and human limitation. It's one of aviation's most sobering lessons, that modern aircraft are only as safe as the systems and decisions that govern them. What makes Air France 447 unique isn't that it crashed, it's that we know exactly why, because the black box told us everything. Most aviation mysteries end in speculation. This one ended in precision, And that precision is why every pilot flying today flies a little safer because of those 228 souls. Subscribe. Each week we uncover how aviation's deadliest mysteries became tomorrow's safety protocols.